Book of Hours is determined to remain an essential platform that offers a creative interpretation for lockdown skeptics and experts who have been censored by mainstream press. Thanks to your donations, we can carry on doing this essential work as working artists. These big issues of the day are vital and need to be heard. So please share our videos, subscribe to our YouTube channel, make a one-time donation on our PayPal page, but most importantly, please be a part of our team on our Patreon page. Go to patreon.com/bookofhours and hit the blue button titled Become a Patron. Thank you. At the beginning of the United States, after the Revolutionary War, but before the Constitution was written, individual states needed to find ways to negotiate agreements between them in order to maintain peace, maintain commerce, and generally get along with each other. As a result, Interstate Compacts were created and have been used throughout the history of the United States, even after the Constitution codified many of the reasons for these compacts in the first place. An interstate compact is a pact or agreement between two or more states, or between states and any foreign government. The Compact Clause of the U.S. Constitution provides that no state shall, without the consent of Congress, enter into any agreement or compact with another state or with a foreign power. The Constitution also requires that Congress must explicitly approve any compact with another state that would increase the state's political power in a manner that would encroach upon the federal government's power. In April of 2020, the governors of New York, Pennsylvania, New Jersey, Delaware, Connecticut, Rhode Island, and Massachusetts announced the creation of a council of 18 representatives tasked with finding a coordinated way to reopen the economy after the forced shutdown caused by the COVID-19 pandemic response. The Northeastern Economic Compact, along with the compacts of the southern states, western and midwestern states, have not as of yet been approved by Congress. And although Congress can give its approval at any time in the future, it's unclear when this will happen or if it will ever happen at all. And it may be that this will be in stasis for an indeterminate amount of time. After the American Civil War, there was a period of Reconstruction, which was also a radical economic realignment between the northern and southern states. It was a period of power grabs and corruption, and would have social, economic, and political repercussions from that time until now. What we're seeing today with the alignments of states within their regions are echoes of the Reconstruction. But instead of the reuniting of the Union, we're now seeing the deconstruction of the federal government. This dismantling is not organic. It's deliberate, and it's happening under the cover of the COVID lockdowns and could be seen as a result of the Great Reset. These interstate compacts are part of a regionalization effort, which is part of a larger agenda of global governance. The United States, as we know it, is changing and will likely go away. As a result, the federal government will likely cease to exist and will be replaced by regional and local governments under the purview of global governance. This is technocracy, This is Deconstruction. These are Interstate Compacts. This is the Fourth Industrial Revolution.
The Interstate Compacts are also known as multi-stakeholder bodies, multi-stakeholder groups, or multi-stakeholder committees. These committees develop policy regulations and procedures for public concerns such as protection of the climate, management of the internet, or the use of natural resources, and are formed for those purposes and never are a pre-existing organization. The selection of committee members depends on the point of view of the organization appointing them. In other words, if the organization has a vested interest in pushing a particular agenda, they will hand-pick a committee member to represent that agenda. The Interstate Compacts that have been formed in response to COVID-19 are project-based, public-private partnerships made up of members from corporations, third space nonprofit organizations, and non-governmental organizations, and an appointed staff member of each state's governor. This may sound democratic, but it's not. These interstate compacts and their appointed committee members exist to develop public policy that benefits corporate stakeholders and undermines democratic processes such as the legacy of local legislative process. In the age of COVID, these committees will decide which businesses can open first or which states might allow larger gatherings, rules and regulations on masks, whether you can get a haircut, see a doctor in person, or require deliveries of your food to your home instead of you personally shopping for yourself. The legacy system of representative democracy in the United States, much like the legacy systems of municipal police departments, retail and commerce, small agriculture, small business, and self-employment, are being disrupted and are going away. They are being replaced by other systems that we've discussed in our new model series. Most people in the U.S. are not aware that their state's government has been replaced by unelected officials who have no public oversight and no accountability to the public. There's a reason for this, and it's because of the media's massive under-reporting of the regional interstate compacts that were formed earlier in the year. The unelected council members chosen for the various interstate compacts have been charged with developing a framework to gradually lift emergency orders and are tasked with finding a coordinated way to reopen the economy as the spread of the coronavirus becomes more manageable. At least, that's what they're telling us. The outward narrative is that these states are coming together to work on ways to reopen the economy, and that these are only temporary measures. But these are not temporary. These interstate compact committees are probably permanent. In fact, this idea to form interstate compacts comprised of unelected committee members was originally presented in language of the Green New Deal over a year ago.
The goal is to find ways to regulate, sanction, and align the contradictory rules which were applied to the populations of the states within the coalition in order to control the movement of people, regulate businesses, and prevent the social instability that they're afraid may take place if they release us, their prisoners, all at once. It's much easier to control a population within the confines of a limited member interstate compact than to implement these stringent, draconian policies on the entire country all at once. And with these alliances forming, mostly along political party lines, it's easier to ban travel to areas or states that don't share the same partisan affiliation or that have less stringent rules. This allows for a more effective means of interstate surveillance within a region and can build an infrastructure of more invasive contact tracing. Because of the political party lines these interstate compacts exist on, the media will promote the cartoonish language of civil war This is a distraction from the fascist policies that come with public-private partnerships that make up interstate compacts. This is not Democrats waging war on Republicans or vice versa. This is the wealthy class, the technocratic elite, waging war on all of us. Because there is no public oversight, there has been a massive arbitrary nature in what policy is or isn't. In the lawsuit brought about by small business owners against Governor Wolf of Pennsylvania, federal court judge William S. Stickman wrote in his opinion that none of the state committee members had any health expertise or medical experience, and that what was developed as policy had no basis in medical science and was completely arbitrary. It's likely that the policy prescribed by the state committee, which came through the Interstate Compact, came directly from a global source. In any case, the global, regional, or local committees were not elected, and there was no democratic process or oversight. All members of each were simply appointed and placed in the committee without your knowledge or consent. Yet, these interstate compact committees, again, with no public oversight, are developing policy and regulations that will affect your life in very specific ways. Each committee member has the interest of corporate stakeholders in mind. Your life and how you will be affected by the decisions these committee members make does not matter. What does matter is that these committees are acting in ways that benefit corporations and the economy of a given region and not of individual states. More importantly, these compacts, as they become more established, will begin to replace the federal and state governments of the United States, along with the constitutional protections provided by the state and federal government, in order to remove these protections from citizens and subjugate them to corporate and global governance.
On the surface, looking at the UN Sustainable Development Goals, with all its indicators and targets, they appear to be something we would support. Who doesn't want equity, sustainability, resilience, bike lanes, safe streets, clean air, and water? But in the world of the Sustainable Development Goals, words like equity, sustainability, and resilience don't actually mean what we think they do. In reality, they often mean the opposite of their given meaning, or they reflect the exploitation of humanity through traumatic events for impact market investing and AI surveillance. And the policies laid out in the Sustainable Development Goals are not driven by people in their local communities. Instead, they're initiated and managed through the systems beyond the control or oversight of people they affect. Sustainable development seeks closer cooperation between the public and private sectors. In other words, the goals of sustainable development will require them to institute policies which shift power and influence away from governments and towards companies and non-state actors. The organizational structure of interstate compacts is essentially public-private partnerships. In all of this, we can't ignore the role of the UN and the World Economic Forum. Their combined agendas of the Great Reset, global governance, and the Sustainable Development Goals are a big factor in the formation of interstate compacts. The public-private partnerships that are organizing the structure of interstate compacts are working with the paradigms of disaster capitalism and the UN Sustainable Development Goals. With governments unable to continue providing services and benefits to citizens because of austerity measures, these benefits and services will be outsourced to non-profit providers paid for by impact investors, which have a vested interest in keeping poor people that way so that they can continue to make money from their misery. What better way to do that than to have a seat at the table of an unregulated committee with no public oversight to develop and set government policies. This in turn is shifting and expanding the traditional view of governance. According to a report published by the World Economic Forum in 2018, even without a political mandate, technology pioneers are increasingly involved in developing private rules, certification schemes, standards, social norms, and policies that end up by default governing the ways that societies work. These default norms and rules are often unrestricted by national borders. This, of course, fits the model of global, regional, and local, and how these public-private partnerships operate and affect public policy and law without any accountability. And the technocrats behind these partnerships feel that if government alone can no longer provide sufficient governance of emergency Fourth Industrial Revolution technologies, whether related to the commercialization of artificial intelligence or the use of social media to influence elections, governance will have to come from new sources of authority and new models of collaboration. But that's the rub, isn't it? New power structures are emerging and we don't even know about their existence. And if we do, we have no knowledge of what they're doing and in turn, no ability to keep them in check or have any influence over their decisions. This is the point in which a democracy ceases to exist and fascism takes its place.
When we talk about regionalization, we want to be clear that what is taking place is not merely the normal collaboration that interstate compacts have traditionally been formed for. What we're talking about is a deliberate dissolution of individual states and the breakdown of the United States as a nation. And this is not just happening in the U.S. These efforts are being seen in other countries as well. Interstate compacts are being formed in order to create multi-stakeholder governance. Multi-stakeholder governance is a building block of global governance in which nation-states will no longer have a place. Instead, governance will be organized globally, regionally, then locally.
Okay, we're at the governor's office here. This is now my 22nd visit over the past 5 months, and it is locked tight. And this is real problematic.
Governor Tom Wolf of Pennsylvania has been missing in action since the beginning of the announcement of his emergency orders. Other than public appearances to announce policy associated with his emergency orders, he has not shown up to his office. Other than making camera appearances with announcements about COVID policy, Governor Cuomo of New York and Governor Gavin Newsom of California, the two governors of the most populous states in the country, aren't doing much more either. In the meantime, the emergency orders issued by the governors who locked down their states are tying up the judicial courts with lawsuits that may or may not remove these emergency orders. Meanwhile, they are keeping the legislative branch of their states busy with legislating countermeasures. The reason for this could be that the governors of these states are providing cover for the state compacts that they're part of in order to undermine the federal and state governments while building up the power of the regional coalitions, and in turn diminishing their own power as state governors as well.
Are pretty much tired of what we're living in as it relates to COVID.
At the same time, big city mayors are becoming more powerful than the governors of their respective states. Mayor London Breed of San Francisco is the highest paid mayor in the country and one of the harshest adherents to COVID lockdowns. mask rules, and overall curtailments of human and individual rights. Now, we're just speculating here, and we know that once the 2020 U.S. presidential elections are over, that what we're about to say will be somewhat correct, an amazing prediction, or completely wrong and ridiculous. We hope we're wrong. We feel that with the onset of global governance, the office of the President of the United States will be nothing more than theater. You'll still vote and think that it makes a difference, when in reality, you're just part of the pageantry of the democratic process, play acting out your empty role as an engaged citizen. Presidential and congressional elections will just be a distraction from the global governance policy initiatives that dictate actual law, and the role of the president will only be that of a prop, ceremoniously signing legislation that was handed down from global leaders. We've already stated that the national and state governments will disappear along with the role of governor of those states. So why wouldn't the president? We think that the big city mayors are going to take over the leadership of local areas, and that the governors who are locking down their states with extreme emergency measures are vying for the larger regional leadership roles. But the real eyebrow-raising speculation that you may not believe, and that's fine if you don't, is that the reason the Democrats put up a lackluster candidate like Joe Biden is either because they want a weak leader in place when the role of the president goes away so that he can help escort it out the door through bad policy or terrible leadership, or that they want to be able to have Joe Biden step down once he is elected for health reasons in order to place Kamala Harris into the role of president. Why Kamala? There are a lot of reasons, but since she's pretty unelectable at this point, she is the type of politician who is willing to remove constitutional protections, enact fascist laws and policies that will usher in global governance and the capitalist overreach of the Fourth Industrial Revolution. And if Trump wins, not much will change, really. He's on board with a lot of the policies and initiatives, like stakeholder capitalism and impact investment, favored by the Davos crowd. And so, as far as we're concerned, the presidential elections will do nothing. We suggest that you don't vote, and that by not voting, you are casting a vote of no confidence. It might be the only way to break the age of COVID and give people back their power.
If the initiatives being put into place for the rise of global governance and the Interstate Compacts become the governing body for each region, then this will displace representative democracy, and your voting rights, your human rights, will no longer be protected or even matter. What we will see is a further merging of corporate and governmental power, which is fascism. As we've stated in other segments of our New Model series, if we don't plan to be part of this system, if we don't agree to be enslaved into a digital slave grid and an AI-driven surveillance panopticon, we're going to have to come up with something else. We've also stated that we don't have all the answers. Most of these answers will have to come from you and your neighbors and local communities. What we can suggest is something known as direct democracy. The so-called Founding Fathers were afraid of direct democracy because their revolution was a bourgeois revolution for the wealthy white men who made up that demographic. They were out to protect their own interests and not the interests of poor people, the people that they enslaved to build their businesses and the nation, women, the native peoples of this land, or anyone else who wasn't a white, wealthy, land-owning male. They were afraid of direct democracy because it meant they'd have to share power with the rabble. And although the subsequent amendments in the U.S. Constitution allowed for more and more power sharing and the protected rights of individuals increased, that last remaining wall that separated everyday people from sharing power in the political process, representative democracy, has never been removed. With the demise of representational democracy and the rise of fascism in the world, it's time to take back your autonomy and sovereignty. And one of the best ways to achieve that is to embrace direct democracy. Direct democracy is a system that works from the ground up, not the top down, and lends itself nicely to horizontal organization. It provides autonomy for everyone and is the only true form of democracy.
What do you dream of at night? What do you see in the dark? Tell me a story you know. Don't you leave out the best part. How the good wins in the end, and the hero doesn't break, only it bends. In the wind, in the storm, in the hail, tell me the heroes prevail. What did you dream of today? Was it a hope or a fear? It might be too hard to say, but I want to hear how the good wins in the end, and the heroine doesn't break, only bends. In the wind, in the storms, in the hail, tell me the heroine prevails. Tell me the heroes prevail. When the good wins in the end, and the hero doesn't break, only it bends. In the wind, in the storm, in the hail, tell me the heroes prevail. And the good wins in the end, and the heroine doesn't break, only it bends. In the wind, in the storm, in the hail, tell me the heroes prevail. How do the heroes prevail? When the heroes prevail.
Good morning, my friends. Just a quick message to say, hope you have a good day, and don't let all the crazy shit get to you. Too much. Have a good day.
His